Psalm 119, Day 10, Speak Before Kings. We'll be reading verses 41 through 48 of Psalm 119. Let your steadfast love come to me, O Lord, your salvation according to your promise. Then I shall have an answer for him who taunts me, for I trust in your word. And take not the word of truth utterly out of my mouth, for my hope is in your rules. I will keep your law continually, forever and ever. And I shall walk in wide places, for I have sought your precepts. I will also speak of your testimonies before kings, and shall not be put to shame. For I find my delight in your commandments, which I love. I will lift up my hands toward your commandments, which I love, and I will meditate on your statutes. Our thoughts for today center around verse 46. I will also speak of your testimonies before kings, and shall not be put to shame. Here's a quote that's been around for many decades and variously attributed to people. Great people talk about ideas. Average people talk about things. Small people talk about other people. Let's talk about small talk for a bit, shall we? Small talk is defined as polite conversation about unimportant or uncontroversial matters, especially as engaged in on social occasions. Popular in small talk is that of the weather. One person quipped, "Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it." To engage in small talk is to take the easiest route with the least risk of revealing anything vulnerable about yourself. Typical would be, "Hi, how are you?" And your reply is rather bland. "Fine, thank you." In fact, you may be doing rather terrible, but that would open your life up to perhaps scrutiny. Better play it safe. Our author in today's verse is not ashamed of God nor his testimonies. In fact, he is willing to speak of such things even in the most daring of circumstances, before those of important stature, as we may think of. For many, a time such as this brings intimidation by those in power, but not our author. He follows this verse with, "I find my delight in your commandments, which I love," in verse 47. Jesus told his disciples that the time would come when they would find themselves defending the faith before kings. We read in Matthew chapter 10, verses 17 through 20. "Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues. And you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. When they deliver you over, do not be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you." The Apostle Paul said on this occasion, making his defense before Agrippa, in Acts chapter 26 and verse 2, "I consider myself fortunate that it is before you, King Agrippa, I am going to make my defense today against all the accusations of the Jews." The scriptures are filled with examples of those who stood before kings and those of authority and gladly spoke of God. Consider Joseph in Egypt before Pharaoh, or Daniel before Nebuchadnezzar, Nathan before David confronting him about his sin with Bathsheba and Uriah. It takes courage at times to forego the pleasantries of small talk and to speak of your faith in God. A few years ago, I had the privilege of sitting and listening to Otis Gatewood relate his meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev, the former leader of the Soviet Union. Of all the things that could have been the topics of conversation, Brother Gatewood talked of faith in God. Yes, there is risk involved. But we must remember what the Apostle John wrote in 1 John chapter 4 and verse 4. "Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world." Jesus told of what he would do for those who were not ashamed to speak of him. In Matthew chapter 10 verse 32 we read, "So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven." So, what would you like to talk about? And Lord willing, we'll meet again tomorrow.